Okay, we're kicking off the FHIR Work Group meeting, part of ballot reconciliation. I'm just going to share my screen so that we go to the agenda for today. I'm chairing. My name is Danielle Tavares-Rickson. I'm a FHIR Work Group co-chair. Jessica Bajicic is going to be scribing for this meeting. So this is the 29th of September. Coming down to the proposed agenda today, we were going to go through approval or are going to go through approval of two sets of meeting minutes, both the minutes of the last meeting and the one before that, because we had postponed that earlier set to this call. We're then planning to run through a ballot reconciliation update. And then there are a number of items open on AU Base for ballot reconciliation. This was the initial agenda, and I think it looks like we've got some markup and comments around things that we might need to undertake there. Initially, there was a set of ballot reconciliation items on the new communication request reason code system, then the new task business status code system. Then going into this item on the consideration of creation of codes or a code system and value set for recorded sex or gender sources. This is a continuation of discussion that was in the previous meeting. Ruben is dialing in at 12 o'clock Australian Eastern Standard Time, so we won't get to that until for like another 50 minutes until Ruben does dial in. And then after that, there is this on the table around removing time from extension, Australian time zone usage context, which is a ballot item raised by Heath, and then talking around the next meeting plans. So that was the initial proposal. First point of order that I would like to do is consider our quorum. The quorum for the FHIR Work Group.
I think we're good now.
Yes, but let's consider it because it is still a small number of different members, and I'd like to seek the community's acceptance before we proceed. So in terms of quorum, we have the commitment that we have a chair and we have at least 3 participants from 3 different organisations. While we have quite a few participants, there's quite a few from the same organisation. So at the moment we have 1, 2, 3, 4 organisations on the line, which is, I guess, 1 more than our quorum. Are there any objections to proceeding to make decisions on the minutes, like approval of previous minutes? Okay, let's go ahead with that. I will then ask those questions when we come to some of the issues, because some of the issues hit different communities and we may not feel that we have sufficient representation to make the binding normative decisions on those. So first up, let's proceed with this one, which is the call on the 27th of August. I'll run through that now. We'll have the attendees up here. There was the agenda we were running through. We were also then had the recording is here. We've got a transcript and chat log captured. Approval of previous minutes. We've got any of our updates. Most of this was a process meeting and there was only one item that was voted on. The discussion and decision is there. Other business in next meeting. Does anyone need more time to review these before we look to approve them? Not hearing any. Who would like to motion approval of the minutes of the 27th of August?
I will, Brett.
Thank you, Brett. Who would like to second that?
I will, Richard.
Thank you, Richard. I'm now going to move to the electronic poll. Changed. Oh my goodness. Okay, you should see that in front of you. Now, before you vote, just in case. So Brett, Landon, Richard can go ahead and vote. In terms of CSIRO, we can only have 2 voters. And I forgot to ask that before we launched it.
Yeah, I was too fast. I voted.
You've already voted,
But
Michael. Has anyone else from CSIRO voted yet? No. Okay. Then who else from CSIRO would be happy to vote for approval of the minutes?
I'm happy to vote.
Okay, please vote Jushi then. For
Okay.
the approval of minutes, we will have Michael Wilson and Jushika Bajicic from CSIRO.
Done.
Okay, that has happened. I'm going to end that poll now. It is 4 affirmative, 0 negative, abstain. And so that motion.
I'm a +1. I'm a +1.
You're a +1 in the chat.
Yeah, I
Sorry,
can't
with
vote.
that
Yep,
being
yep,
calculated,
yep.
there are 5 affirmative, 0 negative, 0 abstain.
So we have a voter allocation officer.
We do. I am taking on that administrative role as chair.
We're keeping a preponderance nice.
Okay, on to the approval of the minutes of our last call, which was on the 10th of September. We do indeed have the attendees here, the agenda. There is then also the recording, and the meetings then went through quite a lot of discussion, which has been captured. Some came to particular motions that were approved. Some did not ended in more in actions, and that's been captured in the minutes. And I think that's actually probably a really pretty detailed set of minutes. Does anyone need more time to review those before we look to approve them? Can I confirm that Michael Wilson and Dushika Bojicic, you're happy to be the CSIRO voters?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, great. Who would like to motion approval of the minutes of the last meeting?
Well, again, Brett.
Brett, thank you. Who would like to second?
I wasn't there, so I'll be abstaining.
I'm
I'll
happy to
second.
second.
Oh.
Mel, beat you to
Yeah,
it.
Michael can second. then.
Okay, Michael Wilson is seconded. I'm now going to relaunch the poll. Okay, please vote affirmative, negative, or abstain, and Brett, pop yours in the chat. Okay, we have our votes captured. I'm going to end that poll, share the results. With what is in the chat, we have 4 affirmative, 0 negative, 1 abstain. The motion carries. The minutes are passed. Okay, while we're here, let's just go through the actions. From the actions from the last meeting, this is just an easy view to do that. Is this big enough for people to see?
Yep.
Okay, great. So of the actions from the last meeting, Brett, based on the discussion in the last meeting, needed to undertake a bit of work with the e-requesting co-chairs to revise the proposal around the codes, displays, and definitions for the communication request reason codes. Brett, I understand that is done. Did you want to give us an update on this action?
Yeah, I mean, we had our discussions, and it led to some other discussions. So I think they're still ongoing. So those items are the ones that we are postponing for this week. So yeah, but we did, I think, make some progress on that. And definitely the discussions are ongoing, and hopefully before the next meeting we'll have a concrete position on those tickets.
Yep. So I think, yeah, the action now is on the e-requesting co-chairs and group to determine the path forward.
All right. And on the next one, which was to so this is still community. Oh no, these are the other 2 code systems with you to work through revised wording for the other 2 items. Can you give an update on that one, Brett?
Oh, so that's, yeah, that was, so I did proffer some details on the business task status as well. And I think, yeah, the premise there was to kind of just with the discussion that we had about reason code and making specific terms, taking that approach, and that's what's in the current set for discussion. But they were also sent on to the e-requesting group to look at. Yeah. So I think we've kind of following what we decided for the communication request reason, to kind of allow more specific coding. So the actual tickets have different suggestions, but I think what's in the current agenda is the set that went to e-requesting to discuss. So I'm not sure. Yeah. So I think it's not, I don't know if it's a joint proposal, but it has been seen.
Okay, we can go
Something
through
on
that
Michael. Yeah,
when
yeah.
they arise in the agenda. The last action was on Ruben. As Ruben is dialing in at 12, we might request an update on that then, unless that's something that you feel that you can comment on, Brett.
No, I think that one is a longer term action anyway. But I think we probably need to work out exactly. I think we got that item today will feed into it that Ruben's talking to later.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll just add that to the agenda so that we know to question to get an update from Ruben. Okay, so those are the minutes approval and the actions. Moving on to the reconciliation update. I have to admit, I have not updated this particular diagram. I think that we are further ahead here. Did you want to give a summary of this and where we are? Oops.
Yeah. So I think, so we have cleared one issue because we decided one in 2 meetings ago, or last meeting. So I think we have covered off a couple of those. Is that
There's
right?
a technical
Yes.
correction.
Yeah, technical correction. That's a technical correction. Yeah. So that was also the co-chairs decided, on that one. And we had one issue resolved in meeting. The triage has continued, and I think we're at the point of, I think we've nearly completed triage at this point. So we still are getting issues referred to us, but I think all of the balloted items have been triaged now. And so,
I know
I
there's
think
not a
that
triage page. Are you
no,
intending to create a triage page, Brett?
I should have, but I didn't. So at
Are
the
you
moment,
intending to?
I don't know if I am at this point because we've done it. But like we certainly have
Have
the
you?
votes coming out. Yeah.
Because my question here is, if this is the JIRA filter for AU base issues, it shows 15 in the list as submitted.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem.
Yeah. No, the status haven't changed. Yeah, I'll put a triage page up and make sure we've covered everything.
Hang on. So this shows 1, 2. So those are triaged. Sorry,
Yeah,
reading this
everything.
on the
Yeah,
right.
there's one unresolved
Okay, it
there.
looks like 100%
Yeah.
have been triaged, actually.
Oh, it's a new one.
Oh, except
Yeah.
for this one.
Yes, that's
Only that one that has not been triaged.
one left.
Okay. Yep, that is the only one that does not have a proposed disposition present. All right. Okay. Thank you. Any other updates that you want to make statements about for AU base?
I think not. I don't have anything extra to add really. I think we will. I mean, we will be looking for anything getting referred to us ASAP, really, because we've obviously got our triage set up, which kind of tees up our discussions for the next probably 3 meetings at least. But yeah, we'll be looking to round things out and get things finalised ASAP, really.
I can confirm from AU Core and AU Patient Summary that there is that from AU Core we have transferred over 2 AU base issues, but they are not ballot. They were raised during the ballot period, but they are not marked as vote in ballot. And those were from Graham Grieve around the gender or identity value set and extension. Binding strength. That there's a reciprocal issue that has come in for AU base from AU Core. I think that is on the list for not this current meeting, but the one after that has already been triaged.
Yep, that just came through yesterday. Yep.
True, but I don't see it in the list to vote on.
Yes, good question.
Can you please add that to the table, Brett, because that did
So
get
which
triaged
one's-
by the co-chairs on Monday.
Yeah, which one
The
was that one?
reciprocal
That was
issue
there.
on adding in the body site and laterality
Oh yeah,
guidance.
that's right. Yeah, that's an issue. Yeah, cool. I'll do that.
So that was a decision from AU Core to move guidance to AU base. An issue was therefore raised on base. The FHIR Work Group co-chairs were advised that the AU Core TDG was seeking addition of this into the ballot reconciliation cycle for base, which the FHIR Work Group co-chairs accepted. So it should be on the 8th of October meeting invite.
Yep, cool. And we did have a recent one too with a common issue coming through with the diagram questions, which has not been.
Has that come through email to the co-chairs?
Yes.
I haven't seen it.
Oh, it has.
Can you forward
just
that
yesterday.
one to me?
Yeah, yesterday. So yeah, we'll get that teed up as well. I think that's a common issue that affects some of the guidance diagram content. Cool.
Okay. Then moving past AU ballot reconciliation status and into the items. So initially, communication request reason, a continuation of discussion on the previous meeting was to happen in this one. But I understand from the update on the action and the comment here made to annotate the agenda that this is preferred to be postponed. Is this to be postponed to the following meeting? So the 8th of October?
Yeah, that is the plan currently, but I think we'll wait for advice on how to proceed on that one.
This can only be postponed until either the 8th of the October or the 29th of October. There are 2 opportunities to address this before we reach the end of the ballot reconciliation timeframe for AU base.
I think it's unlikely we're going to be in a final position from requesting for the next meeting. I think the 29th is more likely.
Plan that.
Given we have to complete the triage and get some direction from the TDG on how we're managing communication request, which may make this redundant. I mean, we could make the change, but then I don't think we're okay with the change in principle, but we may not even use it. So then it's kind of pointless.
So if that happens, the reason that this was brought into AU base was to start supporting a set of targeted communication request reasons.
Yes.
If the use case that was looking to implement this is no longer doing so, and there are in fact multiple questions on the applicability of the codes, then what are the next steps? Is there instead a submission that the FHIR Work Group needs to consider the removal of this AFMM1, noting it hasn't yet been officially published in an AU-based release?
Yeah,
That
because
would
the
be-
actual issue is saying that we shouldn't be using these for reasons, right? So that it's not about the definition, that we actually shouldn't be using these as reasons.
Yeah,
So,
that'll be my preference. So if the TDG decides to go away from this needing this, I think we would apply to have it removed, and since it's not published, removed
Might these
entirely for
become
now.
our category codes though?
possibly.
That would be
No, sorry. Yeah, possible, but probably not.
Probably not is the answer. Yeah. I mean, that's yet to happen, but I think the thing is, if TDG, I think if the e-requesting TDG says we don't need communication request reason coding anymore, and they decide to go away from that, then I think we just say, well, we don't have a need at that point.
So can I
I'd
seek
be
and
happy,
open that up for comment now on an in-principle decision, which I think is worth having. That if a set of specific codes to service a use case came into AU Base as a starter set, but it was later determined that that use case had decided that those codes were actually not appropriate for use in their use case, what are our next steps? I think from a point of order perspective around how we manage the content in AU Base, that it does make sense to me that we would then essentially retract the addition of these in the current release, noting that it may be reinstated in a later release if a additional use case or even the same use case comes back later on.
Yeah, I'd be happy to even consider dropping it back, going backwards in the FMM level to 0 and leaving it as a draft 0 artifact and then not publish it would be, or remove it. I don't mind either way, but it's as long as it's not published, I'll be happy.
Okay, can I seek comment from other people on the line on possible approaches?
I think it's yeah, if we no longer have the use case, then I think removing it is a fine solution, given that it hasn't been published.
I agree, and I'm not sure how we would explain dropping AFM levels from 1 to 0, given the criteria for AFM 1 level.
We just changed our mind.
That is not.
We don't think it's ready anymore. Yeah. True.
But
I think it's easier to. You're right. It's easier to
Mm.
remove. Yeah.
If we kept it, I think we should make these changes in any form, right? Because
Yeah.
it does improve the codes, but the alternative is to make no changes and just remove it.
Yeah. I think. Thinking about it, I'd rather remove it because if nobody wants these codes, why have them? Yep.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Can I ask Richard what your thoughts are?
I got distracted during that, so I don't have any clear thoughts. In general, if we haven't got a use case for something, then it's best to leave it out in general. I agree with that principle. And that, it winds up being a draft thing available for more ideas. But if we haven't actually got a use case, then it's likely to encourage people who don't have the opportunity to think about it to say, I'll adopt that, when it may be just a pointless thing to adopt.
I think that's a really good point, is that I don't think that if the use case via which these concepts have actually been submitted says we don't want to use them, I think it would be a poor idea to leave them there for other people to choose to go ahead and implement them.
Yeah. True.
Yeah, I just was reminded again today at something earlier of how many people are less sophisticated about this stuff than we are, and so we'll easily pick up unfortunate guidance and follow it.
So can we record for the minutes, I guess, that set of probable outcomes that we've suggested on if the advice from the e-requesting technical design group comes through, that these concepts are not going to be adopted for use, then where we will land, or what will be proposed based on this discussion, is to remove this from AU base, noting that doesn't preclude it from AU base forever, but that we would not be comfortable with proceeding to publish this as part of the AU base release.
That fits with an idea that that stuff that's published should reach a certain level of, in a sense, completeness, and not having a valid set of values and use case, I think, counts as being it's incomplete.
Mm-hmm. All right, I think we've come to the completion of what we can do on this one, noting that this will come back to us, and we are now waiting on the e-requesting TDG advice, which has been suggested that it is very likely to actually be that 22nd of October date that we will have that advice come back.
You've got 22nd November up there. Was that
Do
relevant?
I? Probably. Hang on. It can't be the 8th of October, so then it would be, no, 22nd. All that grey ones is October. I really don't like how
Oh,
Windows
right.
11 is
Okay.
doing
Yeah.
dates,
Yeah.
but that's
Yep.
October, sadly. Yes.
No, that's good. Fine.
All right. Are there any other comments or questions people wanted to make on this one before we move on to the next item? Okay, let's move on then to task business status. So there were some comments made about that in the actions. So I have to confirm, will we be talking through these items today, or do we need to postpone? Oh, we are. Okay, so
yeah, at least, yeah, I don't know, Michael. It's more if Michael's happy. Like, I think the final wording might need some discussion.
Yeah, so
anyway, even if we decide.
I think there's a general in principle in this direction is okay, right? But we haven't been through the wording in detail with the co-chairs. And I would also actually like to just let TDG know that, hey, this is being proposed in the FHIR Work Group, and if you're interested in that, have your say.
Yeah, so maybe I'd like
So
just
can
to
we
work through the wording today, and then bring, so the work group is, like, the FHIR Work Group's happy
Yeah,
with the
if you think
wording,
yeah,
and then we can say that is our position
Yep.
to hand over, because this got redrafted based on input, to make it more specific, retain the specific codes, which is not in the tickets, so this hasn't existed before.
So in that sense, we would be agreeing on wording the FHIR Work Group, but we wouldn't be voting. We would be then seeking further advice from the e-requesting technical design group before we brought it to the next meeting, which is the 8th of October, to put to the vote.
Yep. And that first ticket is about the actual nature of the coding itself, which I think we can probably deal with that one. The first ticket we can deal with here.
Okay, so we can vote on this one today.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So should we go to this now? And do you want to share your screen?
Yeah.
Or do you want me to?
Yeah.
Okay,
I'll share, and that way I can press the buttons. Share. Okay, hopefully you can see Confluence. All right, so can you see Jira ticket?
Yes, we can see task business status codes are status reasons, not substates of status.
Yeah, so this was, I did frame it as a negative ballot vote. No, an affirmative ballot vote. So, but it was mainly just a query about the content of the coding system itself, where there's 3 terms that were included, that I was reading them and thought these were in fact reasons for status as opposed to actual business statuses. So, because essentially it was about claimed, which was a request has been claimed by an alternative filler. So it's the reason the request has been cancelled. Yep, cancelled status. And user cancelled is describing the reason the cancellation is in place, and a data issue is describing the reason why a rejection has occurred on the request. So I did have some chats around this, I think with Michael as well. And I kind of can accept that these are business statuses themselves, because there's essentially they're a different aspect of being in the cancelled state for the first two or the rejected state. So they're just more specific states. So I'd be happy to actually withdraw this one, if that's all right. We have other voters though. FHIR also voted on this one. So that was my position. So I think at this point I'm happy that these are meaningful to the business, and so I'd be happy to say let's just leave them in as specific substates of these concepts. So mainly I just like to back out of it.
I need a little more context on this. So this is in task.
Yeah.
And so task, I presume, has a business status element. And we think that we want to have some different available values for business status. But
Yeah.
I think it's, so task has, I think it's status.
Yes.
And I think that there's both a status and a status reason element.
Yeah.
And I suppose the somewhat modeling argument that is playing out is, do we in Australia support a set of task status values that pre-coordinate status reason? And the original issue from Brett was saying that you should simply just have the status in status and put the reason in reason. So post-coordinate essentially through different element values. Is that a fair summary, Brett?
Yeah. Where is it bound, Michael? I can't remember.
Just go to the task resource.
Task, yeah. On our,
the abstract one.
Put the link in the chat, Brett.
Thank you. Thanks for that. I'm there now. Yeah. So yeah.
Because you've got reason for current status and then status.
Yeah.
Status reason. And
Noting
business
status is required. Oh, hang on. No, but that's our
status. So we got status reason, and business status. So status is things like the status of the task. Have I drafted it? Have I requested it? Has it been received? Okay. The reason.
And that's required.
And the reason is an annotation basically on some values of status. And then business status is a single one. It's a codable concept, not a code. And what's that? What's that in general, as opposed to what have we done with it?
I'll pop it in the chat.
It's not. It's not defined.
Oh my god, how many clicks do I have to make? Lots. There we go. I don't know if that actually came through.
Yeah, there's something new in the chat.
Yeah, that's what's bound to the underlying FHIR resource. Noting it's only an example set.
It's an example set. Yeah.
Okay, right. So they are highly specific for very particular ones. So it's very much. So this is certainly a case of, I've specimen in transit. Now, for lots of people, that's just not relevant. So it's a highly specific sort of one. Okay.
Yeah. And so e-requesting to find a set that makes sense for the requesting diagnostics business, and have bound it. Yeah. So it's the play. How does this play out with status reason, and business status? That kind of other questions. Status is essentially a fixed workflow set for task. So there's no you can take subsets, but there's no changes to be made there. And business status is the place where you can do more specific things.
Yeah.
And
business status is basically a single thing for the people involved in this particular task to help them manage their workflow.
Yeah. So what's it say in task definition? It's just business specific nuances.
Yeah, it's between
So there's
actors
substates.
so that a placer and a filler knows the state of the task.
Yeah.
That sort of thing.
And probably not particularly useful to a third party. It's useful to the actual people involved in it. Yeah. Yeah,
it's kind of describing a particular workflow and kind of lets you live in states in between the main status of the task. So yeah, and which is kind of how it's defined, and it makes sense. Yeah, so it's more of a question of the particular terms and whether they could or should be represented as reasons. Yeah, from discussion, I had some short discussion with the TDG folks, and yeah, I kind of believe that these are essentially different end states for cancelled and different rejection states that they can sort of consider as first class states. So yeah, I'm happy to say, okay, if you think that's a business status, I'm happy that the concept's represented there, and so we don't probably I don't need to split it.
Affirmative anyway.
Yeah.
I would not oppose retraction.
Brett, I would just I think that was a good point you made there at the end. Is there actually different end substates, right? Which is that definition of task business status. It's like internal. So depending on if it was cancelled because it was claimed, or it was cancelled because it was user cancelled, or it was cancelled because there was a data issue, right? You might do different things in your workflow based on which one of those it was, right? So
and
like
that was where I got to. Once
So,
I kind of understood. So
in the
I
interest
think
of time, given that the raiser would be happy to retract, not attract, retract the issue. Is there anyone on the line who would still like to consider and do further work on this issue? So any objections to Brett just retracting this?
I guess the question, why aren't these just business statuses? Oh, sorry, why aren't these just reasons for status? Why are they business statuses and not status reason?
That reason we just stated, that they're actually substates of the task status, as in it's a different end state, right, for cancelled, right? So that you
yep. Okay,
yeah, because all of these are substates. So once I kind of can accept that there's different cancelled states, it's not And I mean, you could still state a reason if you wanted to.
No, you said that before the pennies finally dropped. I'm happy with it being withdrawn now. Yeah,
it took me more than 5 minutes to work that out. Let's say.
Okay, so we will note there.
Should we put a description on this?
Retracted.
Yeah, should we put a description on this as to why it's retracted, or just let it be retracted? We don't think the issue is going to come up again.
I should write something down.
Well, there would be something in the minutes, and I would hope that the retraction does provide that comment.
Yep. That's right.
Let's just that. So that'll be action for me. I think I have to withdraw my vote, and then I think I have to get others to withdraw their votes before.
Maybe not. It's affirmative. Have a go anyway. Let
have a go.
Yeah, let us know if you cannot retract it. It's quite possible that you can't, and there can be some administrative. Let me know if there are any issues, and with either my CSIRO voter hat on and or my FHIR Work Group co-chair hat on, we can work out how to take it through the appropriate JIRA workflow to the conclusion.
Yeah, cool. Because I think we've got the voters covered. So
but again, as affirmative, I would hope that does not block retraction. I would understand if negative did prevent that. But anyway, we'll test it out. Let me know.
I'm sure it doesn't work.
Well, it does say close, but that doesn't actually mean it works. Okay, can we just move on to the other ones though? Looking at time.
Yep.
Go
back
where we need to
to-
work through the wording before we then move on when Ruben dials in to the next item. So
cool.
can you take us through those two, please?
Yeah, so these two are in fact I split all of the codes into two different tickets because I had an assumption my first ticket would get up that I'd say these are reasons, and I wanted to reword them anyway. So there's basically the the two tickets are both covering the wording of the terms. So there's a set of them there, and also the three that I talked about as reasons also had rewording. So based on the previous discussions, particularly around communication request reason and sort of having these more specific terms rather than generalizing, the tickets are offering generalized terms. Instead, it was redrafted to be more specific terms. And so that meant adding more detail to the codes, to the actual display terms, and there was some minor rewording around the definition text as well. So I think we might need to kind of compare it to the original.
To confirm, what the proposed specific wording below would actually address the two tickets, both the 51894 and the 51893, which are two different issues raised around language. Okay, so then would you like to show the current e-requesting or the current AU-based content?
And yes, current AU-based content is...
A question about those codes is about the text for those codes is that those particular codes will typically be associated with particular values of task status. And do we have any way to make it easy for people to, say one is, says a little bit more about cancelled. So I presume that then applies to the cancelled one, or one applies in particular to completed. Is it easy to associate these values back to their appropriate task status?
Yeah, that's probably a good point. Because we don't describe it. Yes, yeah.
Some of that association can be done in the definition. So if the definition makes careful use of the words used in status code, then some of that linking can be done quite easily. And contrawise, poor choices there might fight against our intended interpretation of those codes.
True. Noting explicit linkage would have to be done through a set of comments or profile-specific implementation guidance.
Yeah, and that would be a different thing. But just for instance, so request cancelled by placer, for instance. Okay, so the idea is that would be associated with a status of cancelled. Cancelled is in fact one of the codes, so there's a nice connection there. There's no fighting against them. But one thing being that we should check that none of these descriptions or values are fighting against the association we want them to have with task status.
We have that defined in a requesting. I'll put it in the chat.
Yeah.
Okay. So if all that's been done, fine. It just struck me as
no, don't be that
point.
optimistic, Richard.
I
think we should check it.
Yeah, I think if we have, like we could. I mean, there could be clearer language in the definition, perhaps, to make that association, right? It's
fantastic, lovely segue onto the task that we have scheduled right now before Ruben comes in, which was to work on the wording. Shall we do so now?
Indeed. So so we go through them like one by one. Like you see, booked has changed to service booked.
And do you want to also have a third window we can look at, or can people join in at home looking at the link that Michael Wilson has provided so that we can also check that against the criteria that Richard raised on what would help form a good wording for the reason.
Yep. So, in fact, they're all listed here, aren't they? So maybe I'll just show
Yes, they are.
this one. Ooh, let's try that. These ones. Okay. Yep. So, yeah, so because there's obviously, like it's been documented and you're requesting how they relate to the statuses. Yeah.
I don't think we'd have to reword that one for that accepted status, because whether it's accepted or not is probably actually irrelevant for the booking. Like there's probably some lower level business rules there about exactly how that works. Considering
Yeah.
booking could happen at any
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, it could happen. Yeah.
Just for confirmation though, this is codes for task status reason. And what is shown on the right are two fields,
no,
both
business
status
No,
and
business
task
status.
status. No, it is. Is it? Hang on.
Yeah, this is just for
Business
business
status
status.
on the.
Status is the right, and on the left is the business status.
Yeah, it's just
Is
business
it?
status. Yeah, we're not doing reason.
Oh, it's just that the
Yeah.
title of the issue said codes suitable for task status
Yeah,
reason, which made
that's
me
'cause I
assume they were
assume-
about task status reason.
That's because I assume we're going to split it. Because they're split because I assumed this first.
Okay.
We're only talking
Yeah,
business status
yeah.
here. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's just business status now.
So concepts
Yeah,
on the left are business status.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, and what we're seeing on the right is that linkage then into task status.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So conceptually, if you've accepted it, you could have booked it, right, or not. Yeah. So it's kind of, yeah. So these are like the primary status changes through the workflow, and then, yeah.
So
and these
then,
are
shall we go line by
other
line
detail.
on
Yeah.
that first item? Are there any suggested wording changes on service booked?
Yeah.
Only the clinical order workflow has an example code system, and it has visit scheduled instead of service booked. But it's example. They've
Which-
just temporary
Yeah.
example code system, right? So, but
Yep. And the word service was the word service was added because the task has a focus of a service, right? So that's a particular, it's actually implying that the task is about a service, right? Is what it's also doing. So it's quite specific. Yeah. So that was that was just to kind of make sure it was related to service booking as opposed to any other kind.
Yeah.
Yep.
Hang on.
Yeah.
Before we move on,
Yeah.
there is the open question. Are there any suggested changes to the top one? You made a mention there, Michael Wilson, around visit scheduled. Do we need to open I feel like this is the sex and gender thing all over again. Scheduled versus booked.
Yep. Yeah.
yeah,
Do we need to
I don't know
reopen
any of the background behind the cow one, and like I said, it's a temporary example code system. So I don't think we have any reason to have to bind to that. But
Okay.
in the future, who knows where that's going to go, right?
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment because there's a lot
Is
of
there a
ground to cover.
consideration of proposing these up to international? Have these been looked at by CAL,
No,
which
they
is
haven't.
clinical order workflow from HL7 International?
So they haven't been specifically discussed with CAL, other than noting that they knew that our IG was going through ballot and
Okay.
been made aware of it. So
Yeah.
All right. I would
Yeah,
suggest that we later on, if this passes through ballot and gets published in AU Base R1, that we consider an action, probably tasking Michael Osborne there to consider the promotion of these concepts into HL7 International.
I can have a look at that. Yeah.
That'd be good because obviously we'll get more feedback as well.
So I
Happy with
haven't
this
heard
one?
any objections. Just
Yeah.
although we've had a bit of a discussion there, just pausing quickly.
Noting that the wording that Cow uses for filler is full filler. So maybe that might have to change.
I don't think it would. But and by might have to change, are you proposing a change right now?
Are you
Because
proposing
that's
this?
essentially
We could do
the
it.
discussion under topic. We are going to rewrite these now if any rewrites need to happen. If you have a proposal, please make that now.
No, I'm not making that proposal because that changes the
Okay.
language right through the IG. And I think these are IG specific at the moment.
Okay.
All right.
Any other comments or questions on service booked before we move on to request redirected? Hearing none, please go ahead, Brett.
Yeah, this was the one I'm least confident in. Just to frame it, the original term was claimed, and there was some. I'm not. Yeah, so I think I was open to suggestions, but the idea of that was the service request had been essentially filled by another. So that is where a directed request has been claimed by another entity. So it was how to represent that. So it basically this task is cancelled because of the because another has claimed it, and so it's just a way to describe that state.
Now I'll note that Ruben has entered the
Yeah.
The chat. Hi, Ruben.
Hi, everyone.
Do you have time for the next half hour, or do we need to move to your topic straight away and get through that so that you can go?
No, I can be around till the end of the meeting. No need to interrupt what you were doing.
Okay. Then I'll put that back to the group on whether we continue, noting given the time we have available, we will only get through a certain portion of these in the detailed approach we're currently taking before we will need to give at least 15 minutes for the next agenda item 52016.
Yeah. Do we want to just do 10 minutes more maybe and then
Okay, I'm happy for that.
Yeah, that's good. We'll get something done.
Please go ahead.
My comment on this one, so about the redirected, I think claimed is better. Cal is talking about claimed. They're looking at incorporating claimed into their concepts as well. And I think redirected, I think, is a bit because it can still be claimed even if it wasn't directed initially. So I think just someone's claiming it and there's a process associated with that. As a more general comment as well, in the descriptions, I don't like application. I know you're talking, it's like we were kind of specific about actors. I think again the cow ones use these as common actors.
Yeah. I don't know why.
Filler, placer, patient.
Yeah, I don't know why it says application. It's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. So could I suggest we do service claimed?
Yeah. On claimed to me conveys the idea that somebody has, that somebody other than me has grabbed it, while redirected has the idea that perhaps I've handballed it on.
Yeah.
And so, but from what Michael suggested, is the way this actually works is somebody else might have snatched it before I got to it. And so claimed actually fits that sort of workflow. But if it's something where I have to pass it on to another party, then claimed doesn't sort of capture that sort of that sort of process.
Would request claimed be good?
I think it's still request because
any type of request.
Yeah.
Now one thing about claimed is just by itself claimed doesn't say that it's claimed by somebody else. There's, I mean, this may be the best term for it, but there's an idea of this request has been claimed by somebody else and we no longer get to play with it. Seems to be part of the semantics.
Yeah, it's in cancelled. Yeah, it's cancelled because it's been. Yeah, I think that's.
Yes,
but the thing is, but the thing is, claimed could just if you come into this cold be, well, we've claimed it. No, it's claimed by somebody else, and an important part is the fact that somebody else has claimed it.
Same words.
You can't say at the word service. If your code is request, this needs to stay request. Again, we need
Yeah.
to think about other request workflows and other kinds of request resources.
Yeah, that's good. And that's actually more general because there's lots of requestable things. Cool. So go something like that. Request claimed, request claimed. The request has been claimed by an alternative.
Now, I've got to admit, I don't like it. And I don't like it because I feel like the key part is alternative in the description. There's nothing about alternative in the display or the code.
Yeah.
What do people do when they actually like a request is available? Like what if, because we have undirected requests, what is the state at which an undirected request gets, well, claimed? Is that not request claimed?
Yeah, but the request itself, the task with the request goes to accepted or something like that. This is about the
Which of the
cancellation.
statuses there is what gets done when
So,
an undirected request comes through and someone claims it?
yep. So we haven't worked through the exact for the undirected, but following the standard pattern that we would expect is that the undirected one gets cancelled and a new directed task gets created with the status of accepted.
Now that
So,
says to me why I have this problem with request claim the generic being only able to be done where there's an alternative filler. My concern, as you've said, we've not worked through what that is. I would suggest that when we do, why wouldn't we use request claimed? Like what status would it be? It were from undirected. So
sorry,
I think you need what okay, and maybe I have misheard.
Yeah, not every state has a business status. That was I hope that was the thing that I was
In
struggling
e-requesting,
with
it doesn't. But part of what we're trying to do here is build out a robust set of codes that allow for these additional ones we haven't yet thought about. In fact, that's been almost the driving thing around some of these concerns, is that the code has been generic, but the description has been specific. The code here just says request claim. The description says, but claimed by an alternate filler. But
which implies it
alternate
was directed
isn't in the code and display. Is there ever a possibility a request can be claimed by a non-alternate? If there is, this is a problem that we've given that generic code and display to the alternative definition. That's what I'm putting forward.
no, because it's a substate of cancelled.
No, it's not. Not according to your definition. There's no words cancelled. Nothing says cancelled.
Could you replace the word alternative instead of another?
You need to put something like request claimed cancelled or cancelled claim, because all your other cancelled states in business state have cancelled as part of the code. Like this is how we would have to define this.
Yeah, because that's where I started almost, because I was going, oh, cancelled as claimed by another, right? But it's just getting quite specific. Yeah.
Well, if you want, you can say request cancel claimed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So cancelled.
Dash claim.
I'm just looking at what you had for another one. You've got next one is you got request cancelled by placer, and then the next one you got request cancellation handled.
Is the request actually cancelled though? Isn't it just
No,
the
you're
task?
right. Actually, you're
the
a
task
good point.
that got
The
cancelled.
request is not cancelled. You're very good point. Very good point.
It should be task cancel claimed.
Yeah.
Sure.
The request is not cancelled.
Yes, true.
That's
cancelled. Yep, task.
I think you're doing title case.
Is that clear? What am I doing?
Yes.
I mean, is task cancelled because the request has been claimed, not the task has been claimed?
Yes.
So
it
that could say the short could be task cancelled, request claimed. While the code is just task cancelled claimed, it doesn't need the extra information.
The task has been cancelled. Has the request has been claimed by an alternative filler.
I think that will be much better in terms of going forwards for being
That's pretty clear.
unambiguous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Now, an alternative, could an alternative be replaced by just another, ANOTHER, and
I
then
prefer
there's
that.
there's no thing about being primary and alternatives and all that stuff. It's just a sidestep.
Yeah, it's just another.
Mm.
I like another better as
Yeah,
well.
I don't think it makes much difference. Yeah.
It does to us though.
And so I'm going to give you a countdown of 3 minutes before we move to Ruben.
Cool. So I guess people happy with that one.
I think we've done great work.
Great. That's good. I'm going to drop in the chat for Dushi so she can have it. Cool.
This
Right.
is the replacement for request redirected, right?
Yes, replacing request. Yeah. So that replaces request redirected. Yep.
So the next one I think needs to be
next one.
task cancellation handled as well.
Yep.
It's optional, but it's a continuation of that. Basically, it's saying, hey, this has been cancelled, and whoever's it was might need to do something on that to process it, and they have the ability to then to another substate saying, okay, I've seen it's cancelled. Now I've handled that. I'm going to move it on, so I know I've dealt with it.
So what have you got? Well, that says the request has been cancelled.
Well, I
Yeah,
think that's the primary
yeah,
use case,
yeah,
but given the one
yeah.
above, right, it's basically the next state to say, how I've been told this has been cancelled. And it ties into the placer
Yeah, task is
cancelled, right?
cancelled.
The placer
Yeah,
has
task.
cancelled it, but now whoever was assigned needs to go, oh, okay, I need to process that because it's been cancelled.
So what do I want? Task cancelled.
So is it task
handled.
cancelled because the request was cancelled? So
Yeah.
are we doing request cancelled handled, request cancellation handled, or request cancelled
Yeah,
by
sorry,
placer?
I jumped ahead.
No,
Yeah.
Okay, we're doing
yeah.
handled. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, which one are we doing? I was doing placer. Cancelled by placer, but
Do we need an out of session meeting to work through this?
yeah. I think so. I think this is we've run to time anyway, so
We
I think
do. I'm just
we've
also
got the idea
questioning.
though. Yeah.
Can you, Richard, are you available to attend that? I feel that part of some of the circular conversation has been that it's very insular, which has done some really great things around the workflow. But in terms of having unambiguous concepts that the rest of the community could kind of visually see and go, I get what that is. I think we need an external voice, and we're seeing some of that in this meeting. Richard, would that be possible for you to help that?
Yes, it will be possible. I've just managed to unmute.
Cool. So can we task Michael to get a time together with whoever we need to get?
Yep.
Cool.
Well, honestly, I think Michael, Richard, Brett, just getting together
we'll
and
just
trying
do
to
it.
go,
Yeah,
here's
okay.
what it
That's all we need.
unambiguously. So it's not actually
Yep.
changing the concepts. It's just trying to
Yeah.
make them incredibly clear what all of these
That's
things
good.
really mean.
Yeah.
That's good.
So-
That's been helpful, I think. So
Yeah, so I think if we do that, I would definitely, before we vote on it here in the FHIR Work Group,
You
I
can
would
take that.
like the TDG to have seen it, our e-requesting TDG have seen it, and have the opportunity to provide any feedback.
That's good. I think that's better then, because then we can kind of come back with an endorsed set and maybe
Yeah,
vote on
or
it.
the
Yeah,
opportunity,
yeah.
if someone didn't
Change it again.
attend this meeting or provide any feedback, then you had the opportunity, you didn't, right? So
Yeah,
So
cool.
we'll take those two actions
Excellent.
then, Dushi. We've got the action for Michael, Richard, and Brett and Michael Wilson, sorry, Richard and Brett to work through defining those codes really unambiguously. And then for Michael Wilson to take those through the e-requesting TDG and provide advice back to the FHIR Work Group. Is that something that we can do by the 8th, so like our next meeting, the 8th of October?
given it with next e-request TDG is tomorrow, so we're out of step with that. Basically, I think if we have the triage resolution to this in these tickets, I can send them out, say, next Thursday to the TDG and say, by the way, these are going through the FHIR Work Group at this meeting. If you have any comments, please provide them. So yeah,
That
potentially.
does seem like it would fit within that time frame. Yeah.
Yeah, if we have the ballot issues with the resolution in it, I can then include that in the TDG, what's coming up next Thursday. In my email, it goes out, this is what's in our next meeting. I'll also say, by the way, FHIR Work Group is going through this in the next meeting.
Cool. So we can just move the 2 tickets to the next meeting and have an
Yeah,
answer, new answer
whether
for FHIR Work
I'm
Group.
not sure that
Yeah.
the first one will be able to be addressed at the next meeting, but this one probably can.
Oh yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, so the tasks business status can. The
Mm.
one on communication request reason has
Yeah.
already been advised by Michael Wilson to actually be the following FHIR Work Group meeting on the 22nd, I believe, of October.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go
be-
to the next one.
Yeah, let's go.
Sorry.
Yeah,
I'll
let's
be
go.
on leave from the 14th of October for 3 weeks.
So, Ruben, on with this item around consider creating the AU recorded sex or gender code system and value set and extensively binding it to RSG source, which we discussed in the previous meeting. And out of that one were some notes and actions. One of the actions that we captured was to engage NCTS to add any missing Australian service concepts to SNOMED CTAU and draft the value set. I believe further that there's been conversations on the idea that I think we reached in the last meeting a general agreement that we were happy that these would be SNOMED CTAU concepts because these are sources of demographic and clinical information in Australia. And the path forwards was indeed to identify the sources of data we wanted to capture, get those added in the SNOMED CTAU, and also draft a value set that is essentially the key sources and incorporate that as the source value set with, I think you proposed an extensible binding in AU base. Does that match what?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. That matches exactly. So obviously I've been away the last week, but what I have sought to find out is where exactly in SNOMED CTAU all of these proposed things would actually go, noting that the ones that are there at the moment are all actually registers under a hierarchy called registers. So we may need potentially a different hierarchy for some of these other things. So I've got to query out with Matt or Dell at the moment, just some background on that. But yeah, everything else you said is fine. I think there's one other open question here, and that is whether we want to make this an AU base value set or an NCTS value set. I'm still leaning towards an AU base one for 2 reasons. One being that we've got most of the standardization around this RSG extension in AU base. And secondly, I'm not sure whether every source system that will have this information is necessarily going to be something that is able to be put into SNOMED CTAU and a sort of selectable by an NCTS value set. But I think once I have more information from Matt, I'll be a little bit more firm on that. But otherwise, everything you said is spot on.
So we've got a window of only a couple more meetings before we close reconciliation for this current release and things move into the next one. I think for us to proceed, so just kind of, I guess, points of order for getting into the release, I think we could, I think the FHIR Work Group could vote on and agree on a list of sources if you wanted to put those together and propose them, including the concepts that would make up a value set, and then that work could be undertaken. And if it does get published in time, be published in AU base. And if it doesn't get published in time, then obviously that just automatically comes into the next release.
Yeah. So I guess I just need to know what that sort of deadline is, I suppose. So obviously, I'd say this, and Michael, please jump in if I have these timelines incorrect. The soonest we could potentially have something in SNOMED CTIU would be towards the end of October. And we can certainly have a draft value set done by that point. Is that soon enough, Danielle?
I don't even think we need to go that far. I think as long as you
Well,
have like the CLD, so as in
yeah.
if we
Okay.
made a definition that we will seek to add the following concepts to SNOMED CTAU, and that the
Yeah.
value set would be made up of the following concepts, I
Mhm.
think that would be sufficient to vote on that for inclusion in the AU-based release.
Okay. I can certainly work towards that in the next week. I mean, I think the key one for me really is the HI service, because that's got so much immediate relevance to things that people would only use this for. But I will see how far I get with that. So yeah, by the next meeting, I'll have that value set ready for voting on a resolution.
Okay, that sounds great. Any questions for Ruben on this concept? I think, Brett, you had your hand up earlier.
I really want us to understand how this domain is defined, because going through, because there's a distinction between an information source like Australian Medicare and an actual system interface that supplies the information. I also think we've got to probably think about whether these are primary sources or other sources. And I think that, because I was trying to actually list them there, that was my attempt at listing stuff and stuff like, I mean, there's no Medicare. I mean, there's Medicare Online, which kind of covers some things, and but I'm not sure these are sources for sex and gender either. So my question was like, if I get a shared health summary from my health record and it's got a sex or gender defined in the content, is that a source? Even though I know it's come from the HI service originally, or it's been verified by the HI service. And so just understanding, what are we terming as sources? Is probably what I was going for. Yeah.
The
Okay,
domain is the. Sorry, go ahead, Danielle.
I was just going to say that I think rephrasing what Brett has brought up is almost some of the provenance discussion that really happens of is it the last hop versus like the true source of where that data was captured is, I guess, really what you're suggesting, Brett. Because we have that same problem with HIE aggregation about what's the real source of the health data we're seeing, or am I just recording the last hop, as in the last place I got this data from?
Yeah, and it's also because essentially, like, the identifier itself is defined, like Medicare numbers come from Medicare, right? So and so it's I know that because it says that in the definition. So if I have a sex that's come from Medicare, I get I actually have to. This is a source system, so I have to actually know that I have to name a system that it came from, which is effectively like an API or some other kind of software system that has supplied this, as opposed to using, like, because I think of the other things more like record sources, which are Medicare. I know this is a Medicare number, so it's come from some other Medicare. Like, if I've read it off the screen and typed it in, it's different than getting it from an API. And so I think it's just clarity on what the concept is and what we're trying to actually describe. That would be that was the questions I was coming up with when I was trying to think about what would be in this set. Because I can read your sex off the HPOS web interface and type it in, but that's not really like an API. Yeah.
Well, presumably, what you're seeing in HPOS and what you're seeing via an API is looking at the same data within Medicare. So is there a difference?
But I think that's
Presumably.
just that's the same as me reading it off a passport.
Precisely, and that's the difference here.
Yeah.
There is an element for paper documents, source
Yeah.
documents, and there is this element which deals with non-document sources. And I'd say it would have to be, consistent with the service that you're getting it from.
Yeah, that's okay.
And that's
So-
that's sort of that's the code system's job, right? To define the concepts that you
Yeah.
put in there.
Yeah, but I think it's also like, because there are like HI service is actually, I know it's an API source, because I'm accessing it directly, and
Yeah.
But yeah, the other ones, like I think we need clarity about when we are using the software to like an API to populate it versus reading it off a screen that's not a web application or something like that. So there's some distinctions there, because I don't know, because I'm not sure
I
if
don't
you
understand why.
Yeah, I agree.
If I'm
I don't
seeing it
understand
through
why.
reading it on the screen or getting it automatically by provided to me on a wire format, wouldn't it be the same?
Yes, it would.
Yeah, I'd like I'd like to know that though. So it's
Yeah, but we can't know that. Sorry. In terms of the but we
I
can't
can
know
know
that.
I build
But
software, I
then
can
I
know
don't
that.
see why this is okay. I feel like
Yeah,
you're
no,
almost
but
asking
no,
for like
no,
the equivalent of a date accuracy extension on like
no.
RSG accuracy.
Yeah. But I think we've got to be pretty clear about, like if it's an application name, like I'm fine with
So
that, or an
where
API
where
name, that
where
makes sense
where
to me.
I
Yeah.
have some sympathy for what you're saying, Brett, is in that second bullet point. That really should just be Australian Opera. It shouldn't be Thai. That's unnecessary because that's actually an interface. And we don't talk about the B2B gateway for the HI service. So I can concede that could lead to confusion, and we should drop practitioner information
Yeah,
exchange there, because you
like
can look up that stuff
yeah.
on the web
I-
or via an API. But
applications of some kind, I think that would be good. So if it like, although, is there a distinction? Like, say I do use Pi or I do read it off the ARPA webs
there should
page.
be no distinction because it's the same register of practitioners,
Yeah,
same
but
as the
then
HI
it's
service and
but
HPOS.
then it's just a record source. So I kind of go, what's the
Yes.
difference between reading the
Yes, it
passport?
is.
But if I read it off a passport
If you
document or access the passport API, is that the same?
Well, the
No,
difference is,
it isn't.
sorry, go ahead, Danielle.
Well, I was going to say exactly what Ruben is saying. There's two means by which you can record the source. One is document, and the other is system. And yes,
Yeah.
you would get the same sex value if you hit the system as if you saw the document. But depending on your actual evidence is what
So when I look
allows
at
you to
my
record it.
when I look at my digital driver's license, is that different than looking at my actual driver's license?
I hope not. Is there a difference?
Yeah, I hope not.
Is there a
Yeah,
problem?
but so
It
one of
sounds
them's
like you'll
one
get
of
the
them's
same info, but you've got
one
them
of
from
them's a
different
record
sources.
source. Yeah, one of them's a record source and one of them's a software source.
It sounds like
Exactly.
you'll get this. Sounds like you'll get the same information through different pathways, and so you record.
Yeah.
If you're recording the pathway, then you'd want to record that appropriately.
Ruben, I
And
think we might need to have a chat with Brett just because I
I agree.
need to wrap
I'm
this
going.
up.
I'm going. Why bother make the distinction if it's all just
Because
doesn't
the
matter where it
extension
comes from?
makes the
The extension makes the distinction, not us. Unfortunately, they defined this in such a way. I mean, I wish they had done it as just a single
In
source
general,
element, and you could
yeah.
clarify whether it was a document or
All right.
non-document. But
That's
because of the
okay. I'm happy with
extensions
that.
work,
So
you can't get rid of it.
No, I'm happy. I understand better. So basically, it's any digital source goes in source, and any hard to hard source is a record
Yeah.
source.
Yeah,
All right, that's
basically.
fine. That's fine. I'm happy with that. So it so I expect the names here will kind of reflect the digital application.
Well, we'll just refer to the service name and drop things like practitioner information exchange where they exist. I think that's the only case of it. We'll just have healthcare identifier service, Opera, Medicare, miles record.
Yeah, but Medicare is multiple systems,
Okay.
right?
We're not going to wear a wrap.
There's lots of
so
Medicare
we're not
systems,
going to talk
right?
about the great detail here. Ruben has an
Yeah.
action to go away
Yep.
and identify
Yeah,
the list
cool.
of
Cool.
things Likely Ruben, maybe Ruben and I will have a chat with Brett around the extension to make sure that those concerns are incorporated. We will have to obviously now bump this one around remove
yeah.
time for extension. We probably actually should have dealt with that this time. I will, because I think it will be really quick, but we're going to do that
Yeah.
next meeting. So next meeting, we've got a number of actions. We also have identified a number of items that will hold over to our next meeting. And I think that we will also see, looking at our potential agenda, it looks packed. Can we
Yeah.
really address all of that in the next meeting? Going to this one, looking at August 8th, that's a lot of new
Yeah.
stuff,
It's a lot of stuff.
including the ones we're already holding over.
Yeah, that's too much stuff.
I would suggest that the FHIR Work Group co-chairs need to consider doing an e-vote asynchronously if there's any of these possibilities that can move to that, because we're not going to get through what seems to be like 16 JIRAs in the next meeting.
No. Since
Okay.
we've done one so far, so.
So let's have an action item on the FHIR Work Group co-chairs to consider releasing an electronic vote if there's any obvious and easy items for the community to vote on in that form. And otherwise, I think we've come to the end of the meeting. Is there anything else that anyone needs to talk about before we close this? All right. Thanks everyone for your time today. I think that was a really good discussion.
Thanks. And thanks for dialing in, Ruben.
Thanks.
No
Miles.
worries. Thanks
Yes.
all.
Thank you. Bye.